Welcome to the Burn Your Mortgage Podcast, a Canadian real estate podcast that shows you how to pay off your mortgage sooner and live well while doing it. Now, here's your host, Sean Cooper.
Welcome to the Burn Your Mortgage Podcast. I'm Sean Cooper, and it's great to be back for another episode. On today's show, I'll be talking to Prakash Amarasooriya. Prakash is the 20-something-year-old who led the charge to revamp the Grade 10 Career Studies course in Ontario to incorporate financial literacy. Prakash and his colleagues at the Toronto Youth Council launched an online petition in the fall of 2016 that got picked up by the mainstream media. Prakash met with the then Minister of Education, Mitzie, and soon after, plans were made to roll out a pilot project at 28 high schools, laying the groundwork for financial literacy to become part of the curriculum. In my interview with Prakash, we discuss why financial literacy is so important to him, how he managed to succeed where so many others had failed by getting financial literacy included in the education system in Ontario, and how he would like to see financial literacy further integrated into our school system. Without further ado, here's my interview with Prakash. Hi Prakash, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sean. How you doing?
Pretty good, thanks. It's so wonderful to have you on the show. I've been trying to connect with you for a while to do an interview for my website, so it's wonderful to have you as one of the first guests on my podcast.
No, I think I'm honored and pleasure to be here.
Great, so let's get started. You are a man with a humble beginning. Can you tell us a bit about your upbringing and why financial literacy is so important to you?
For sure. So it started when I was in high school, when my parents lost their jobs in the 2008 financial crisis. I was actually in grade 10. And when that happened, I think it was my first real shock at learning about how much I don't know about money and how the world works around me. And being so young, I think it vitally impacted how I perceived the world. And in kind of a reaction to that, I started asking myself questions I never had to before, such as, what do I do if I want to own a house one day? What do I do so the situation doesn't happen again? And that's what I think it piqued my interest. It wasn't until after university that I did something actively about it, but it was when I was 15 years old where it became, I think, something very important to me.
That's quite inspiring. I mean, for me, when my parents split up, that's kind of when financial literacy became important to me, and I started reading books, personal finance books. So I can totally relate to that. So that was definitely a great answer. So some people have called me crazy for working 4 jobs when I was in university, but you went a step further and worked 5 jobs. Way to upstage me. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about how you managed to do that and what it taught you?
I guess alluding to what I said earlier about kind of reacting heavily to the situation. It wasn't like I went out and planned to get those 5 part-time jobs. It was more like I knew I needed to gather income to kind of save up for my education and plan for my future, while also kind of stating for the time that I had now. So I started with applying to a job fair for no frills, went to that. Then I got a job at the Taekwondo studio that I was working at, which led to the 3 other jobs later down the line. And the reason why I chose those 5 jobs instead of doing one full-time job is because they were working around my schedule, and it allowed me to do school, my extracurriculars, as well as these jobs to make sure that I had a full schedule and not feel like I had to compromise one or the other. That being said, talking about work ethic and time management, I think it was one of the toughest periods of my life. How I stayed on track is I actually wrote an Excel document of when my classes were, every single extracurricular time after school, and then I planned my work hours around that. And it was a consistent schedule that I followed for around 3 years while I was in high school, and I followed it religiously. But if I'm being honest, it wasn't also the best situation. I slept very, very minimally and ate maybe like 1 or 2 meals a day, and it was tough. But I feel like anyone in that situation would have done what they had to do in order to get to living a sustainable life. But I don't wish that on anyone, and I hope people out there don't have to go through that either.
No, totally. It's great that you could grind that out. And I'm just curious, did you learn any financial lessons from that time period?
Yeah. To be honest, I know a lot of people, when I talk about financial literacy, mention that saving is a drag, but because I had to do it involuntarily, I kind of found it actually quite fun to see kind of money in a bank account, and especially when you're 15, when you didn't go from $0 an hour to like the minimum wage at the time, and also kind of seeing the money in my bank account grow. Because I knew I was saving up for university, I loved seeing that my money would grow without kind of seeing it drop. And I actually got to the point where saving became a hobby for me, because the mentality was, oh, you know what? I can see this number grow higher. It was kind of like a video game level score. And it's like you see this thing go higher and it feels like you're doing great. Anytime you had to do expenses, it felt like, oh, I lost that challenge a bit. So saving to me became actually a fun thing to do, because it allowed me to have options. It felt like I was in control of my situation, which I felt like I lost when my parents lost their jobs. But the one thing I would have liked to have learned that I didn't know back then was about how to invest, and how to not just let money work and not just trade my time for money, but how do I actually make it grow exponentially, or how do I make my money work for me?
That's a great answer. And yeah, I saw it the same way. Paying down my mortgage became addicting. So I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So, so great. So for years, people have been trying to get financial literacy included in the education system in Ontario to no avail, but you were able to make it happen in a relatively short time span. Can you tell us how you were able to see success in this time?
Yeah, and you put it very nicely. When I started doing this campaign, it wasn't something that I tried to do actively. It was more, I think, a reaction to seeing what I saw. And so to put things in context, after I graduated from university, I started working at the bank. And while working at the bank, I wanted to join the Toronto Youth Cabinet with a focus on education. And while working at the bank, I would notice that people would come into the bank not knowing how to manage the finances. And what I noticed even more was that the children that accompanied these individuals would see these habits, and living off of overdraft was one example. And they would see these habits and notice that, you know what, maybe this is normal to be in debt. And I knew that they'd be worse off than than the previous generation, because it normalized them that they had to be living in debt and kind of always having money coming out of their account and going in. And so that's when I said that we need to teach them while they're young in order to kind of break this cycle. So I combined these two interests and reached out to the government with a proposal that I'd work with the Toronto Youth Cabinet for around, I would say, from January to August, I think around 8 months. We'd actually worked on this before we took it to the public. We actually reached out to them, and the government advisors said no to our proposal, which is to be expected because of the fact that governments usually resistant to change. And I understood that point, but I felt that this was a topic that was heavily needed, and our suggestion was to put it into the Grade 10 Careers course, which we felt was a mandatory course. And we weren't suggesting a new course entirely. We were asking them to amend something that, to be quite frank, needed the amendment. It's a course that people have said that needed a revolutionary change, and we felt that we can do it by putting a useful topic into, again, quite frankly, a useless course. So once we had done that, we heard the no, and to be honest, that was kind of discouraging. But we said, you know what? How do we look at this as an opportunity? And I thought, well, if we go public with this, which we know teachers, parents, students, and everyone of the like would find this to be a reasonable cause, we thought we'd get their support and push the momentum towards our side, which we felt this pretty much how government changes is to the will of the people. So that's when we decided to approach the media. And our strategy was to publish the petition on Thanksgiving. This was actually Tom Gleason's idea from the Toronto Youth Cabinet, the executive director at the time. And the rationale was, if we publish it on Thanksgiving, nothing interesting is happening on Thanksgiving. So if we can get people to sign up for this petition, when we do the press release the day after, we'd hopefully get more attention, especially because we positioned it from the voices of youth in Toronto. And because it was an Ontario position, we wanted to make sure that we pushed outside of just Toronto. And so we did that, got a lot of media attention in those 3 weeks. And we noticed that the government had to change the response from, oh, we think we're doing fine to, okay, we'll think about it to, okay, we'll meet with them. And in 3 weeks, I met with the education minister at the time, Mitzie, and I think how I approached her was we didn't want to be on opposite sides of an issue. We actually want to work with them to build this kind of professional relationship where we can advise them on what we think youth would like, and they can see themselves as working with you into making this change. And you asked why we may have been more successful than other people before us, is because we were presenting this as something that the youth wanted. This wasn't something that people were imposing, that people or students want to learn while in school. We were saying it while being those individuals. So I think it was a unique voice that needed to be heard.
That's a remarkable story. Thanks so much for sharing with our listeners. So tying into that question, overnight you became the poster child for financial literacy. Can you share with us a bit about the experience in the media limelight? And do you have any funny behind the scenes stories to share?
Being quite frank, when we started this petition, I noticed that doing the youth voices, while incredible, wasn't apparently enough. And it wasn't until I shared my personal story that I shared with you at the beginning of this that I think some of the people in the media started taking a bit more seriously. And it's unfortunate, but that's, I guess, how the game is played. So that being said, I'm not a very media savvy individual. Case in point was when my first interview with City TV. We were filming down Western Road, and they were doing a tracking shot of us walking down. And while walking down the street and pretending to talk and talking to Roger Peterson while he was on camera, I actually tripped. And when I tripped, it was at the end of the shot, so we had to do another shot walking back the other way. And so if you look at that video, people noticed, especially the people who are like close friends and people who live on that street would notice that we did a tracking shot going one way and one going back. And so once it got published, people were questioning why we just didn't go down a different avenue. And I explained that I tripped halfway through. And and especially in that interview too, my water tank broke at home. So I came to work kind of all disheveled, didn't shave my beard. And so when I got the call that they wanted to film that very hour, I was like, great. And so it was bad enough trip, but also looked like I hadn't shaved in a bit. Wasn't the best first impression I could have gave the media, but looks like everything all worked out.
Yeah, I mean, you got your message out, so that's all that matters at the end of the day. So.
I really hope so, yeah.
Great. So the Ontario government launched a pilot project across the province to help enhance the careers studies course taught in high school. Can you tell us about the newly revamped careers course and what it covers in terms of financial literacy?
For sure. So when we initially suggested financial literacy being a part of the Great Tech Careers course, the ministry decided to take us further and revamp more than just that module, but doing the entire course. So they've actually proposed doing what's called a module system, and they would introduce, I believe, 3 to 4 topics within the careers course, and they happen to be financial literacy, digital literacy, innovation, creativity and entrepreneurship, and career pathway planning. So these 3 to 4 modules they want to do, I guess, to the entire course. And the logic behind this was, instead of doing a revamp of the course every 3 years, doing it a modular based system means that they can take out that module, revamp it, and put it back within a year's time, which is, I think, a great tactic to make the government move quicker on topics such as education. And I think they had, in 2017, done a pilot of this program within 27, 28 schools, and they had received feedback from teachers and students on how that would go. And in September of this year, 2018, it'll be launched across the province, all across the province.
No, that's great. And do you have any further details about how the course is going to look across the province? Like, can you give us the inside scoop on that?
Well, to be quite frank, when I finished getting the petition through, I felt that was kind of the end of my communication with the government, was because I know that they have experienced curriculum directors who would probably do a lot of better job of developing it than I would, and I didn't feel like it was my place, especially not having kind of the background in education as other individuals would have. That being said, I've been consulting with the government every few months just to check up on how things are going and kind of provide my own feedback from things I've seen. And yeah, it's been kind of surreal to kind of still be involved in provide my feedback and try to show them that there's more to financial literacy than just teaching them the right concepts. One thing that I found very important was teachers needed to feel confident and competent about what they were doing in financial literacy. If they felt that they didn't feel kind of adequate enough to deliver this topic, then the students wouldn't feel the same way. And so financial literacy is a topic that everyone needs, but not everyone knows. And that's why when I meet with the government, we have to make sure there's proper teacher support to make sure they feel that they are given the best chance to teach these students this important topic. And in terms of the course material itself, I don't feel I have the best lens on that. The reason why is because it was developed for the teachers and students. And so they have, I think, the ones that went through the pilot module, they have better insight than I do on that, which is, I think, better, because I wouldn't want people of Ontario to think that a private citizen had kind of access to that. But the people that should be receiving their education were delivered that pilot. And I will see how it rolls out in September 2018. One thing I will note is that with the recent election that just passed, with the Conservative majority taking place in actually a few days, I'm not sure how that'll affect this rollout of this course. And so my intention is actually to reach out to the government in a few weeks once they've hopefully chosen a new education minister to see how things roll out. The good news is when it comes to financial literacy, it's something that it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're a part of. It's something that I think everyone finds an important topic. And it was something I was going to reach out to the opposition party at the time, had it not gone through the government that we worked with. I was going to go through a private member's bill if it didn't work through, but thankfully we didn't have to resort to that.
Well, that's great. I mean, I don't see, I don't know what the current government is thinking, but I can't really see a reason not to go ahead with it. So fingers crossed everything goes ahead as planned.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Great. So integrating financial literacy in the careers course is a good first step, but it could still be further integrated into our education system. How would you like to see financial literacy taught to the next generation of young Canadians?
No, it's a great question. I think when we started doing it, ideally, I think we all wanted to be a separate course in its own, and of course, taught over multiple grades. I think that's the kind of the ideal state. When we reached out to the government, they mentioned that they had already taught it from grades 4 to 12, but it's been kind of seamed into the all the courses. My issue with that is when it's kind of blended into all these courses, no teachers and individually feel like they're a part of teaching it, and especially if they're not trained on it, they're not going to take the advantage to teach students within their respective courses, whether it be English, math, or science, about financial literacy. So we needed to be explicit, and that's why the careers course was suggested. That being said, ideally one day, if we had our own financial literacy course, I think that would be great. And I think a lot of us would want it to be taught while they're younger as well too. Developing that sense of good habits and just getting into the flow of it would be ideal over, I guess, across multiple grades. The other thing to note is it is also difficult to talk about something when you don't really have a tangible connection to it. So what I mean by that is when you're working, you understand the concept of money, you understand how to budget, you understand moving away 10% of your paycheck. But if you're not working, and most people grades 10 below aren't, if you're not working, telling them, oh, you know what, you need to make more than $14 an hour, you need to make this much money to meet the lifestyle that you want. For them, it doesn't mean much. And so it's a bit tough to talk about it. So when I do financial literacy presentations, I always have to talk about more the mentality and the concept and the idea of discipline more than I do the actual financial literacy concepts. The idea of a mortgage may not relate to people while they're in high school, which is unfortunate, but some people like to be interested. I think you and I would have been interested in that topic, but we can't say that for everyone. So I think the challenge is how do we find a way to make this topic that we know is going to be important for them in the future, important enough for them to learn it while in school.
I don't know. Maybe we can suggest that they plan their mortgage burning party one day. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. When they're already going to be partying in university, doing another party on top of the phone mortgage planning may not be the trigger that they need.
Yeah, exactly. So you were the recipient of 2 prestigious awards. Can you tell us about the honors and what they mean to you personally?
Yeah. So one was the Volunteer Toronto Award, and the other one was the Canada Volunteer Award. And in doing all this work that I did with the government and with the Toronto Youth Cabinet, it's kind of cool to know that there was all volunteer work. I think it was just more because while I do work in a bank, I never wanted to give people the idea that this was something that came from kind of we didn't want there to be any corporate influence into this. That's why I always made sure to represent just the Toronto Youth Cabinet while doing this work. And so all the work I'd done with it was outside of my work time. It was also done without consulting anyone other than the Toronto Youth Cabinet and the financial literacy partners we worked with across Canada. Both those awards, I actually was honored to be nominated by Tom Gleason from the executive director I mentioned earlier for the Toronto Youth Cabinet for the Volunteer Toronto Award, and by Junior Achievement for the Canada Volunteer Award. And so when we did the financial literacy petition, we actually asked quite a few financial literacy partners across Canada, as well as school board trustees, to kind of support the petition. And that community engagement was great to work with. And in receiving these awards, it was a great way to connect with other people that are doing great work, whether it be in financial literacy or outside of it, all across Toronto and Canada. And yeah, it was an honor to receive it. And I think it just validates that volunteering is something that's still, if not so, more important than it was before. And I think people who are always looking at a way to make a difference, volunteering is actually the best place to start, because when you're paid to do something, I feel there's a bit more of limitations. But if you're volunteering to do it, I think the sky's the limit. So I think, these awards help validate that mentality, and I hope people can take that to heart.
No, that's a great way to put it. Just was wondering, on the topic of real estate, do you think it's realistic for millennials to aspire to buy a house these days with the high cost of real estate in cities like Toronto and Vancouver? What advice would you give to younger people looking to save a down payment? Because it definitely can be daunting.
Yeah, no, do I think it's realistic? That's a tough question. Like, for me, do I think it's possible? Yes. And for me, whenever there's a slight possibility of doing something, I always go for it. I always try to think, as much as statistics are important in trying to say, like, oh, I don't know what the number is, but however many percent of millennials can get a home, not everyone's going to get a home. Maybe not everyone wants a home, but if it's something you truly want to do, then there should be nothing stopping you from getting it. I know yourself and other individuals who have made it happen, and that means it's possible. And so if there's a way, there just needs to be a will. And in terms of advice to looking to save for a down payment, I think the main thing is always starting early. You can never start early enough. And the earlier you start, you and I probably know the values of compound interest. The earlier you start, just the better it is. And if you start saving money now, especially if you're younger than I am, you'll always make more money than I do based off compound interest and the value of time. And so I think the main thing is setting a goal. You need to know what that goal is. And if your goal is to buy a house today, I would probably say project ahead, because you know with inflation that those costs are going to rise, even if the market doesn't. So whatever your goal is, kind of go beyond it and try to save as much as you can earlier on. And I think the other thing too is working. Like, you can either make a lot of money by working hard a lot and saving up the money, or you can find ways to progressively move up in your career to get higher income, which again is both are hard options to do. But again, is it possible? Yes. Is it realistic? Maybe not for everyone. But that being said, I think it's a matter of what do you want to do with your life. Some people want to buy a house, some people want to rent, some people, based off the community, it doesn't make sense to. So I think it's asking yourself, what do you need and what do you want out of life, and making sure that you can make the money required to take care of your needs, and anything else you want, I think making sure you have a budget left over to take care of that as well.
Yeah, totally. And, it doesn't make sense for everyone to buy property right now, but, maybe in a couple years, it might make more financial sense for you. So, yeah, always reevaluate your financial situation and, I guess set yourself a goal, like you said. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's, I think you bring up a good point. I think it's about looking at what's like your external factors as well too. It's not just about, I want to buy a house now. It's about, does it make sense? Like, I think using logic and understanding that kind of like buying a house is like a business move. And so if you consider yourself a business, which most people should, does it make sense for your business to make this purchase right now? If it does, go for it. If it doesn't, then patience is your best virtue.
That's a great way to put it. So can you tell us where you are in your career right now and how you plan to continue to be involved in financial literacy and shape it for the years to come?
Yeah, for sure. So working at the bank, this financial literacy work kind of helped, I think, give me a bit more exposure to actually start working in corporate in TD. And so I'm actually in this great program called the Management Associate Program, which is a 2-year rotational program where every 6 months I get to go into a different department, learn about the business, and provide value. And this is actually my last week at my first rotation in personal lending, where we talk about things such as student lines of credit and other lines of credit. And we want to kind of say, oh, you know what, it's kind of unique to be working financial literacy when actually I have a background in health. I have a degree in kinesiology as well as a minor in psychology. And one thing that was relevant to both the field of health as well as financial literacy is that both of those are correlated. If you want to have higher health, having a higher financial status is actually one of the top factors of, I think, having long-term health. So I think finding ways out of your socioeconomic status has a lot of implications. And so while I'm not working on health right now, it's kind of something that I keep in mind while I do work at the bank. So it's a great 2-year program, which allows me to get exposure to different side of business that I never had exposure to. And on my off time, I actually do financial literacy presentations either through Junior Achievement or through the Canadian Bankers Association. But I also do individual financial literacy presentations on my own, based off requests that I get from teachers through my email. But in terms of what the future has to hold, it's been crazy up to this point. I never thought that my life would have gone in this direction, but seeing in hindsight how it has, I wouldn't change a thing. And I'm excited for what's to come. I always believe that this is kind of going off topic, but what I think about is we live life in different timelines. I feel like there's multiple timelines out there where you would have gone down different paths of life. And my goal is to live the best timeline that I am in right now. So if there's a life where I would have done something crazier, my goal is to be even crazier than that in the timeline that I'm currently in. So that's kind of how I drive my life, and let's see where that takes me.
Wow, that's a great answer. So it's been wonderful having you on the show. Before I let you go, is there anything of interest that you're working on that you'd like to share with our listeners?
For those who are interested in financial literacy, if you're in high school, if you're a student in high school, or you want to learn about financial literacy, Junior Achievement is a great organization. They have things called a company program where you can start a company while in high school. And they also have economic for success days where people can come out to kind of give you a 1-day workshop on financial literacy. So teachers, if you're listening to this podcast, feel free to reach out to Junior Achievement and see how they can help support you. And in my spare time, like I mentioned, I do financial literacy presentations on my own. So if people are interested, they can always reach out to me individually on any of my various social media platforms, and we can take it from there and see if that works.
Great. And we'll make sure that we include your contact information in the show notes. So thanks so much for being on the show today, Prakash.
No, the honor was all mine. Thank you so much, Sean. And I look forward to seeing how your podcast develops. And thank you for, again, having me on.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Burn Your Mortgage podcast. Besides being a podcast host and money coach, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker. If you or anyone you know, family, friends, coworkers, or neighbors could ever use any unbiased mortgage advice or a second opinion, feel free to reach out. You can reach me by email at seancooperwriter@gmail.com, or you can call or text me at 647-867-3711. Also, be sure to head on over to www.seancooperwriter.com and sign up for my free weekly newsletter. As a small token of my appreciation, you'll be able to download my ultimate mortgage checklist on choosing the perfect mortgage. You can also sign up for a free one-on-one 15-minute money coaching consultation with yours truly. I look forward to hearing from you and helping you burn your mortgage sooner too. Once again, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Mortgage podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating. Until next time, happy mortgage burning.